Developing student ownership. Alright, welcome to Rue Studio, or the headquarters at my home office. I wish I had done what others did and recorded this in my actual classroom studio because it's really cool, but you guys will have to deal with the boring curtain background. In this video I'm going to discuss developing student ownership, which is sort of a collaboration between a handful of different instructional strategies. I had a hard time picking one in particular that I felt summarized what it is I wanted to discuss and what I use so frequently. It's sort of a mix between goal setting, providing teacher clarity, promoting metacognition, and overall supporting the executive functioning skills in students. So I dubbed it developing student ownership, which is something that, being in a non-tested content area, allows me a really awesome opportunity to do, which is to just support this development in high school students. So I do teach high school art. I teach sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And so this is the instructional strategy that I use. I'm going to call it developing student ownership. So in this video, we are going to define what student ownership means in an educational setting. We are going to discuss how student ownership is connected to classroom instruction. And then we're going to explore, and I'm going to discuss four different tools that I use to support this instructional strategy. And then I want to reflect on how student ownership helps prepare students for the 21st century, and why I have chosen to really focus on this year in my studio. So let's get started. Okay, so what is student ownership and what does it have to do with an instructional strategy? Student ownership is where students take charge of their own learning. They are responsible for a large portion of the decision making within the instructional process. A lot of student ownership takes place in flip model classrooms, student-led classrooms, project-based learning, classrooms where students are really active in their learning. It requires a lot of student ownership. And so the instructional strategies that I use help to create an environment where students have to take ownership in order to be successful. So in a high school setting, this creates a classroom where students are learning how to manage their time. They are learning how to find and use the resources necessary to be successful, not only in the art studio, but in life. And it kind of teaches them sometimes some hard lessons about pre-planning, follow through, reflection, and it really lets them walk through those steps while they are learning and practicing the content that I'm delivering. So this is important because in an art studio, the students are constantly producing. So there's not so much testing. There's actually almost no testing. They are constantly producing original products. The more creative, the more out of the box, the better. And in a classroom where that is the case, the work is incredibly individual. So there isn't a specific, this is what it looks like when you're done, this is correct. It's very subjective and requires a lot of critical and creative thinking. So these strategies that I use help to ground the kids and give them a chance to organize, pre-plan, reflect, lean on each other, and get advice and feedback from other students. And so let's look at some of these tools, and I can explain how I use them to increase the learning and instruction in my class. Before we jump into the tools, I want to just quickly take a look at what executive functioning is. I throw this word around a lot. I'm mostly focusing on these three components of executive functioning, but I wanted to give you this visual because I thought it was so great. The tools I use help with the activation, focus, and effort components of executive functioning. Oftentimes we are so overwhelmed by the
content in front of us that we don't know how to organize or prioritize the information and plan how to approach the task at hand, being able to shift our attention to what is the most important, and regulating how we spend our time. So these are the 3 things that I think that the students struggle with the most and need the most support and structure in. So that's why I've developed these tools.
Okay, so now that we know just a teeny bit about what executive functioning it is and why it's important, I'm going to go over the tools that I use to support instruction. But the purpose of these tools is to help students become organized, to develop an action plan for getting started, for planning and prioritizing how are they going to achieve a product that reflects their understanding. So often I see kids sort of stuck at the start, is what I call it. They sort of just sit there and look, and they're like, oh, I don't even know where to begin, because the creative process is hard. There's not a right or wrong answer, and that's very overwhelming for our students, especially if they are in districts that don't start with the fine arts in elementary. They haven't been pushed to become creative thinkers, and it's a lot like hitting a brick wall. They are very answer driven. Right or wrong is what they've been taught to do. Handing them a box and telling them think outside of it is hard. So these are the tools that I use to help ground kids and give them some structure in order to begin the process of being creative and creating a product that reflects that creativity.
All right, so tool number 1 is what I use at the start of any given project. This is our project proposals. And what we do here is that students identify the project that they are going to do, the project path. How am I going to represent how I know how to do blank? So this may be a specific project path if they're given choices. It may be, it could be any number of things. But this is where they sort of identify what it is they're going to do. This is where they're going to make a list of the materials that they're going to need or technology that they're going to need. So they're pre-planning. What am I going to need to create blank? Down here is where you really start to get into that metacognition piece, where they start to think about their thinking. What about my creativity? What about my work is going to be different from everybody else? Is my thought process is different than someone else? My artwork is going to be very individual. It represents me as an artist. We get pretty deep in here. So this is where they start to think about what will set their artwork apart from everyone else, style-wise and physically. And then down here's a goal-setting piece where they create one goal that's tied to that project. What goal will they set in order to grow as an artist through this project? And so then one of the most important pieces of this is right up here, this little guy, peer review initials. So after they create this mega awesome plan, they have to review it with a classmate. They go over their plans, they give each other feedback, and then they initial it. And then at that point, they can come and show me and get my approval. So really, I'm at the very end of the chain here. I, give them some direct instruction or information, and then from there they have to create this plan, and then they have to review that plan with a fellow artist who then gives them feedback, or positive feedback or constructive criticism, and then they sign off on it, and then they come to me. And so a finished version of this kind of looks like this. All right, so you can see how they do this, and they generally do this in their sketchbooks for me. Another strategy I use is the Get Ready, Do, and Done. This is a fundamental planning tool used a lot in SPED, but I have differentiated it up to use in Gen Ed. This asks the 3 essential questions: what materials will I need, what steps will I do, and what does it look like when I'm finished? So this is what it looks like in a high school art studio. It is a lot of text, and I generally just have it up on the board for them for the entire duration that they are working on a project. So for this one, it's a painted paper collage that they are doing to represent the human form. These are the materials they will need, This is the step-by-step process that is the framework for creating a piece like this. Of course, it allows for a lot of creativity. And then this is what it looks like when they're done, and some choices of things to do once they are finished. So this breaks it down for them. Not a lot of thought in the how to get there, but what to do once you're there is up to them. Once their pieces are complete, I let them, or I require them to write critically in a reflective journal. This is where they will reflect upon the original goal that they set back on the project proposal. They will kind of critique and evaluate the process, the artistic process, what went well, what didn't go well, what would you change. They describe their work, they name their work, and so this is their critical thinking piece. But of course, it always does tie back to the goal setting. I think that that's one of the most important key features. And then this is something we do twice in a 6 weeks, and this is part of that student ownership and pre-planning and goal setting and reflection piece all kind of tied together. This is a grade audit, and what this is basically a checklist of everything that they've done with simple directions. Check what you have done, highlight what's missing, create a plan. What is your goal? What are we going to do to make sure you are successful? Here's your resources. I make a list. So this is basically a visual checklist. I'm going to do this, this, and this in order to be successful. I review it with them, and then we sign it. And so not only does this create a documentation path, it helps them become accountable for what they need to do to be successful, which supports our slogan, no one fails on accident. But these 4 tools used together in an educational class like art, where it's so product based, really puts the ownership of learning and production back on the students and requires them to constantly set goals and reflect, and be thinking about what we're creating and what we're thinking. And so it gives them a framework and a structure to do that. So as a wrap up, goal setting, it's the key. It's the key to all of this, and keeping them tied into their learning. And teaching them how to really think about their own learning and how they are going to represent that visually is a big old process. And then reflecting. Love this. One does not simply make progress without self-reflection. I couldn't believe that more. So I ran a little over 10 minutes. I'm sorry. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care. I'll see you out there.